The Porsche 911 Turbo S came around the corner doing 40 in a 15 zone. The old man never saw it. He was climbing out of a rusted 1998 Toyota Camry with a bag of groceries in one hand and a cane in the other, moving at the speed of someone who'd learned that rushing only broke things that couldn't be fixed. The Camry was parked crooked, 2 feet over the line, front tire angled wrong, the way people park when their hands don't grip the wheel like they used to. The Porsche screeched to a stop 6 inches from the Camry's rear bumper. The horn blasted, 3 sharp, furious notes that echoed off the storefronts of Briarcliff Avenue like gunshots. The old man flinched. The grocery bag slipped. An orange rolled under the car. The driver's door of the Porsche swung open, and Marcus Hale stepped out like the sidewalk owed him an apology. 34 years old, 6'2", custom suit that cost more than most people's rent, watch on his wrist that could have bought the old man's Camry 40 times over. Hair slicked back, jaw set, eyes burning with the particular rage of a man who'd never been told no and couldn't process the concept. "What the hell is this?" Marcus said, gesturing at the Camry like it was a dead animal someone had left in his driveway. "You're in my spot." The old man turned slowly. He was 78, maybe 80. Small, stooped, wearing a corduroy jacket that had faded from brown to something between gray and memory. His face was a map of decades, deep lines, sunspots, a jaw that might have been strong once, but had surrendered to time. His eyes, though? His eyes were different. Dark, steady. The kind of eyes that had seen things and decided not to talk about them. "I'm sorry," the old man said. His voice was quiet, not weak, quiet. The difference matters. "Your spot." Marcus pointed at the parking space like it was his birthright. "This is reserved. Can't you read the sign?" There was no sign, not on this stretch of Briarcliff Avenue, where the parking was public and the meters had been removed 2 years ago. But Marcus Hale had decided, the way he decided most things, that reality was whatever he said it was, and anyone who disagreed was an obstacle to be removed. "I don't see a sign," the old man said carefully. Marcus stepped closer. The cologne hit first. Expensive, aggressive, the olfactory equivalent of a raised fist. "I don't care what you see, old man. I'm telling you to move your piece of garbage car before I move it for you." A crowd was forming. Not a big one. Briarcliff Avenue wasn't that kind of street, but enough. A woman with a stroller, 2 teenagers with skateboards, a barista from the coffee shop on the corner, towel over her shoulder, watching through the window. A construction worker eating a sandwich on a bench. Maybe 15 people total, scattered along the block, all turning toward the sound of a voice that expected obedience. The old man bent slowly, painfully slowly, to pick up the orange that had rolled under his car. His knees protested. His back made a sound like a door that hadn't been oiled in years. He placed the orange back in the bag, with the careful, deliberate motions of someone who couldn't afford to waste food. "I'll move it in a moment," he said. "I just need to—" Marcus grabbed the grocery bag and threw it. Not aside, not gently. He grabbed it from the old man's hands and hurled it across the hood of the Camry. The bag split on impact. Eggs cracked, milk carton burst, bread tumbled into the gutter. A can of soup rolled off the hood and dented itself on the curb. The old man stared at his groceries scattered across the pavement. A week's worth of food. $27.40, which he'd counted out carefully at the register because the cashier was young and impatient, and he didn't want to hold up the line. "Now," Marcus said, his voice dropping to that low, controlled register that men like him used when they wanted to feel dangerous. "Move the car." Quick favor. If you've ever watched someone destroy what little another person had and felt your blood go cold, tap like and subscribe. Because Marcus Hale just made the worst decision of his life. And the man standing in front of him was not who he thought he was. The old man didn't move. Not toward the car, not away from Marcus. He stood perfectly still, his cane resting on the pavement, his eyes fixed on the eggs dripping down the side of the Camry. "Those were my groceries," he said simply. "And this is my street," Marcus replied, stepping closer. Close enough that the old man could count the threads in his lapel. "I own the restaurant on the corner. I own the building next to it. I'm about to close on the building next to that. This block is mine. And you," he jabbed a finger into the old man's chest, hard enough to make him stumble backward, "are trespassing on my patience." The old man caught himself on the Camry's door. His cane clattered to the ground. The stumble sent a ripple through the watching crowd. A few gasps, a muttered curse from the construction worker, the woman with the stroller pulling her child closer. "Pick that up," Marcus said, pointing at the cane. "Pick it up and get in your car and drive away. If I see this rust bucket on my block again, I'll have it towed and crushed." The old man reached down for his cane. His hand was shaking, not from fear, from something else. Something that looked like patience running out. "Son," he said, and the word came out so quiet that Marcus had to lean in to hear it. "You should walk away now." Marcus laughed. The sound bounced off the buildings, sharp, dismissive, the laugh of a man who'd never been on the wrong end of consequences. "Walk away? From some bum in a 20-year-old Toyota telling me what to do?" He turned to the crowd, arms wide, performing. "You hear this? Grandpa's giving me orders." A few people looked away. Nobody stepped forward. Marcus turned back. "Let me explain something to you, old man. I'm Marcus Hale. My father built half this city. I've got more money in my watch than you've got in your entire pathetic life. So when I tell you to move, you move. When I tell you to speak, you speak. And when I tell you to disappear," he grabbed the old man by the collar of his corduroy jacket, lifted him slightly, not off his feet, but enough to make the fabric bunch around his throat, enough to make the old man's face go red, enough to make the crowd go absolutely silent. "You disappear." He shoved. The old man hit the side of the Camry and slid down, his back scraping against the door panel, his legs folding beneath him. He landed on the pavement next to the broken eggs and the burst milk carton, sitting in a puddle of someone else's contempt. Marcus straightened his jacket, checked his watch, looked at the crowd the way a man looks at furniture, present but irrelevant. "Somebody clean this up," he said, gesturing at the old man and the groceries as if they were the same kind of mess. Then he walked into his restaurant, the door closing behind him with the soft, expensive click of a world that had been built to keep people like the old man outside. 15 people watched. 15 people did nothing. The barista came out eventually. She helped the old man to his feet, picked up his cane, gathered what she could of his groceries, The bread was salvageable, the soup can was dented but intact. Everything else was ruined. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her name tag said Danny. She was maybe 25, with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly, not from cold, but from the adrenaline of watching violence and being powerless to stop it. "I'm fine," the old man said, brushing off his jacket. There was a rip in the shoulder seam where Marcus had grabbed him, egg yolk on his sleeve, milk soaking through his right shoe. "You should call the police. That was assault." The old man looked at her, those dark, steady eyes. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Danny. I work at the coffee shop." "How long have you worked here, Danny?" 3 years, but the landlord just raised the rent again. We might have to close." She said it the way people say things they've accepted but not yet grieved. "Who's your landlord?" Danny glanced at the restaurant Marcus had walked into. "Hale Properties. They own most of the block. They've been buying everything, raising rents, pushing out the small businesses. The bookstore closed last month. The flower shop is leaving in January. Pretty soon, it'll just be his restaurant and whatever chains he brings in to replace everyone." The old man nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already knew. "And the people who've been here for years?" "They leave." Danny's voice cracked. "They always leave." The old man patted her hand. "Thank you for helping me, Danny. You're a good person." "Do you want me to call someone?" "No need." He opened his car door, lowered himself into the driver's seat with the careful mechanics of a body negotiating with gravity. "I know who to call." He pulled the Camry out of the spot, slowly, crookedly, the way he'd parked it, and drove away. Danny watched him go. She felt something heavy settle in her chest. Another old person pushed out. Another quiet life crushed under a loud one. Another day on Briarcliff Avenue where money won and decency lost. She went back inside to finish her shift. She didn't know that in 48 hours, she wouldn't need to worry about the rent. She didn't know that the old man she'd just helped off the pavement was about to dismantle Marcus Hale's entire world. And she definitely didn't know his name. If she had, she would have understood why he'd smiled when he drove away.
Tap like if you've ever underestimated someone based on how they looked. Because the old man Marcus Hale just shoved onto a sidewalk was worth more than everything Marcus had ever touched. And he was done being patient. The old man's name was Arthur Devereaux. If you searched the name, you wouldn't find a Wikipedia page or a Forbes list or an Instagram account with a blue checkmark. Arthur had spent the last 40 years making absolutely certain that the world knew as little about him as possible. What the world didn't know could fill a library. Arthur Devereaux had built his first company at 23, a construction firm. By 45, he owned the land his buildings stood on. By 60, he diversified into commercial real estate and a private investment fund worth more than the GDP of several small nations. Then his wife, Margaret, got sick. He sold the visible empire, the companies, the boardrooms, the buildings with his name on them. The holding structures remained, managed by lawyers who reported to a trust bearing no public connection to his name. He nursed Margaret for 3 years, changed her bandages, drove her to appointments in the same Camry he still drove because she'd picked it out in 1998 and he refused to replace anything she'd chosen. She died on a Sunday. Arthur buried her and retreated into a life so deliberately small that people saw only what Marcus Hale had seen. An old man in a worn jacket
driving a car that belonged in a junkyard. It was a disguise, the most effective kind, the kind that required no effort because people's assumptions did all the work. One of the things Arthur still owned, quietly, through layers of trusts and holding companies, was a block of commercial properties on the east side of the city. Briarcliff Avenue. Every building, every storefront, every inch of sidewalk where Marcus Hale had just thrown an old man's groceries. Marcus's restaurant? He leased it from Whitfield Holdings, LLC, a subsidiary of Devereaux Trust. Arthur's signature was on the original lease, though Marcus had never traced the ownership chain beyond his landlord contact. Marcus Hale was building a sandcastle on someone else's beach. Arthur drove home, a modest house on a quiet street, the kind of house that rich men don't live in, which was precisely why he'd chosen it. He parked the Camry in the garage, carried the surviving groceries inside, and sat at his kitchen table. He looked at the rip in his jacket. Margaret had bought it for him in 2003. She'd said the corduroy made him look like a professor, and he'd worn it every autumn since, because hearing her voice in his memory was worth more than any suit in any store. Marcus Hale had ripped Margaret's jacket. Arthur picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 4 months. Mr. Devereaux. The voice was female, crisp, professional. Grace Park, his chief counsel. She managed the legal affairs of his trust with the warmth of a surgical instrument. This is unexpected. Grace, I need you to pull the file on the Briarcliff Avenue properties. All of them? All of them. And I need the lease agreement for Unit 7B, the restaurant tenant. Hale's restaurant, the steakhouse. That's the one. A pause. Has something happened? I met Mr. Hale today, Arthur said. He's not a good tenant. Grace was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, she processed the understatement, assessed the likely reality, and calibrated her response. I'll have the files on your desk by morning. Should I involve the property management team? Not yet. I want to read the lease first. Every clause, every condition, every remedy for breach. Understood. Arthur, are you all right? He looked at the ripped jacket hanging over the back of the chair. I will be, he said. Good night, Grace. The file arrived at 7 a.m. Arthur read it at the kitchen table with coffee and a pen, marking passages the way he used to mark blueprints, precisely, methodically, with the patience of a man who understood that the difference between winning and losing was usually found in the details everyone else skipped. The lease was 42 pages. Marcus Hale had signed it 3 years ago. The terms were standard commercial: monthly rent, maintenance obligations, permitted uses, insurance requirements. But buried in the fine print were clauses that Marcus had clearly never read. Arthur's lawyers didn't write leases that favored tenants. They wrote leases that looked fair while giving the landlord absolute control. Clause 14.3. Tenant shall maintain the premises in accordance with all applicable health, safety, and building codes, and shall permit landlord inspection upon 24 hours written notice. Clause 17.1. Any alteration, renovation, or structural modification to the premises requires prior written approval from landlord. Unauthorized modifications constitute a material breach. Clause 22.6. Tenant's conduct on or about the premises shall not create a nuisance, disturbance, or condition that diminishes the value, reputation, or character of the property or adjacent properties owned by landlord. Clause 22.6. Arthur circled it twice. A man who assaults someone on the sidewalk in front of the property he's leasing,
in full view of neighboring businesses, customers, and the general public, has created a condition that diminishes the reputation of the property and adjacent properties. Material breach. Arthur set down his pen and called Grace. "I need 3 things. First, send a formal notice of inspection to the restaurant. Clause 14.3, 24-hour notice. I want a full walkthrough. Second, hire an investigator. I want everything on Marcus Hale. Business dealings, lawsuits, complaints, code violations, personal conduct. Everything. And the third thing? Find out who else he's hurt."
It took the investigator 6 days. The file was 73 pages. Marcus's restaurant had been cited 4 times by the health department. Grease trap violations, rodent sightings, all swept away through a donation to a health inspector. His other businesses showed a pattern of predatory behavior: lawsuits against former partners, competitors driven out through false liens, properties tied up in legal knots until owners sold at a loss. And there were the people. 7 individuals had filed complaints against Marcus in 5 years. A former employee punched in the staff kitchen, paid $15,000 to sign an NDA. A delivery driver threatened for asking Marcus to move his car. And a server at Ember, Claudia Reyes, cornered in the walk-in cooler, groped, then fired when she reported it. She'd filed a police report that went nowhere and tried to hire a lawyer, but Marcus's legal team buried her in motions until she ran out of money. Arthur read Claudia's file 3 times. Every story was different in detail, but identical in architecture. Marcus hurt people who couldn't fight back, then paid enough to make the evidence disappear. Arthur called Grace. "It's time." If you've ever wished that someone powerful would use their power to protect people instead of crush them, keep watching. Because what Arthur Devereaux did next didn't just destroy Marcus Hale's restaurant. It dismantled his entire life. Phase 1 began with the inspection. Marcus received the formal notice on a Monday. He read it, laughed, and tossed it on his desk. Landlord inspections were routine annoyances. He'd had 2 before, both conducted by a bored property manager who'd glanced around, checked a few boxes, and left within 30 minutes. This one was different. The inspection team arrived at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. Not 1 property manager. 4. 2 structural engineers, a fire safety specialist, and a health code compliance officer. They moved through Ember with the methodical precision of people who'd been told to find everything. They found everything. The kitchen hood suppression system was 6 months past its required inspection date. The emergency exit in the back hallway was blocked by stacked boxes of liquor. 3 electrical outlets had been modified without permit. The grease trap hadn't been professionally serviced in 8 months. The walk-in cooler temperature was 3 degrees above code. And in the basement, the space Marcus had converted into a private lounge without authorization, the engineers found unauthorized structural modifications. Load-bearing walls had been altered. Support columns had been removed to create a larger space. The work had been done without permits, without engineering approval, and without any regard for the fact that the building above contained 20 apartments full of people. The report ran to 29 pages. Material breach of Clause 17.1. Material breach of Clause 14.3. Material breach of 6 separate city building codes. The formal notice of breach was delivered to Marcus on Wednesday morning by a courier who waited for his signature. Marcus read it in his office. The blood drained from his face. "This is garbage," he said to his lawyer on the phone. "They're trying to shake me down. It's a landlord who wants to raise my rent." "Marcus, these violations are real. The structural modifications alone could trigger a city investigation. if the building department gets involved, then make sure they don't get involved. That's what I pay you for. I can try, but the notice gives you 30 days to cure the breaches, or the landlord can terminate the lease. And some of these, the structural work, can't be cured in 30 days. That's months of engineering and construction. Then I'll fight the termination. You can try that too.
But Marcus, who is this landlord? The notice came from something called Whitfield Holdings. I've never heard of them.
Some corporate landlord. They're all the same.
I'm going to dig into their ownership structure. If we know who we're dealing with, we can negotiate.
Marcus hung up and poured himself a drink at 10 a.m. He wasn't worried. Not really. He'd fought landlords before. He'd fought everyone before. The world was a negotiation, and Marcus always had leverage. He didn't know that the leverage was sitting in a modest kitchen 3 miles away, wearing a ripped corduroy jacket and reading the inspection report with the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd built the machine and knew exactly which buttons to press. Phase 2 was the people. Grace Park contacted Claudia Reyes on Thursday. She didn't identify Arthur by name, only as a private individual with resources who has an interest in ensuring that Mr. Hale faces accountability for his actions. Claudia was cautious. She'd been burned before. The police report that went nowhere, the lawyer she couldn't afford, the system that had chewed her up and spit her out. "Why now?" Claudia asked. "It's been 2 years." "Because someone with the ability to help only recently became aware of your situation," Grace said. "We're not asking you to do anything you're not comfortable with, but if you're willing, we'd like to fund your legal representation, connect you with an attorney who specializes in employment and assault cases, and ensure that this time the process goes to completion." "And what does this person want in return?" "Nothing. No repayment, no publicity, no obligation. Just the knowledge that the right thing was done." Claudia was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "The server who worked there after me, Jessica Thornton, he did the same thing to her. She didn't file a report because she saw what happened to me. But she'll talk if she knows someone's actually listening." Grace found Jessica, and through Jessica she found 2 more. And through those 2, 3 more. 7 women, 7 stories, 7 instances of Marcus Hale using his position, his money, and his rage to take what he wanted from people who couldn't stop him. Arthur's legal team didn't file 1 lawsuit. They filed 7. Simultaneously. Each one carefully constructed, each one supported by witness testimony and documentary evidence that Marcus's previous lawyers had paid to suppress. And each one filed in a different jurisdiction to prevent consolidation. The lawsuits landed on Marcus's desk on a Friday afternoon, delivered by 7 different couriers within the same hour. He read the first one, then the second. By the 4th, his hands were shaking. By the 7th, he was screaming at his lawyer. "Who is doing this? Who is coordinating this?" "I don't know yet. The plaintiffs are all represented by different firms, but the funding appears to come from the same source. I'm still trying to trace Whitfield Holdings." "Find them. Find whoever's behind this. I'll bury them." "Marcus, listen to me. 7 simultaneous civil suits, plus the lease violations, plus the structural issues that the city is now asking about because someone, and I think we know who, filed a formal complaint with the building department. This is coordinated. Someone is coming after you systematically. This isn't a shakedown. This is a demolition." Marcus slammed his phone down hard enough to crack the screen. Phase 3 was the block. On Monday of the following week, every tenant on Briarcliff Avenue, Every business that leased space from Whitfield Holdings received a letter. It was signed by Grace Park, and it said, simply, Whitfield Holdings is pleased to announce a rent reduction of 15% for all commercial tenants on Briarcliff Avenue, effective immediately and continuing for a period of 24 months.
This reduction is offered in recognition of the loyalty and community contribution of our tenants and reflects ownership's commitment to maintaining a diverse, vibrant, and locally owned business district. Danny read the letter 3 times. Then she called her boss. Then she cried. The bookstore that had closed? The owner called the number on the letter and was offered her old space back, renovated at half the original rent, with a 2-year lease that included a rent cap. The flower shop leaving in January? The owner received a personal phone call from Grace Park inviting her to stay under revised terms that would make her business viable again. One by one, the small businesses that Marcus Hale had been squeezing out of existence received lifelines from the same entity that owned the buildings Marcus thought were his stepping stones. Briarcliff Avenue, which had been slowly dying under Marcus's pressure campaign of rising rents and chain store replacements, began to breathe again. And every business owner who'd watched Marcus Hale bully his way through the neighborhood started to understand that someone powerful, someone invisible, had decided to fight back. Marcus noticed the changes. He noticed the bookstore reopening. He noticed the flower shop taking down its closing sale signs. He noticed the new energy on the block, the foot traffic returning, the sidewalk tables being set out, the sense of a neighborhood that had been given permission to exist again. Andy noticed that his restaurant, Ember, his pride, his proof that he was building something important, was suddenly surrounded by businesses that were thriving while his was drowning in lawsuits, inspection failures, and a lease termination notice that gave him 23 days to fix what couldn't be fixed in 23 months. Tap like if you've ever watched a bully slowly realize that the world they thought they controlled has been rearranged around them. Because Marcus Hale's worst day wasn't the lawsuits. It wasn't the inspection. It was the moment he finally met his landlord. It happened on a Thursday. Marcus arrived at Ember at noon to find his restaurant closed. Not by him, by the city. The building department had conducted an emergency inspection based on the structural report, found that the unauthorized basement modifications posed an immediate safety hazard, and issued a stop work order pending a full engineering review. A yellow notice was taped to the front door. Closed by order of the city building department. Unsafe structure. Do not enter. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, staring at the notice, his face cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Rage, disbelief, panic, rage again. His staff stood in a cluster by the entrance, uncertain, afraid. The sous chef asked what they should do. The hostess asked if they'd still get paid. The busboy, a 19-year-old kid working his first real job, asked if he should look for other work. Marcus didn't answer any of them. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. "Get down here, now." "Marcus, I've been trying to reach you. I found the ownership chain for Whitfield Holdings." "And?" "It's a subsidiary of a trust called the Devereaux Trust." "Devereaux? Who the hell is Devereaux?" "Arthur Devereaux. Marcus, he's one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast. Was, at least. He's been out of the public eye for years, some kind of recluse. But his trust owns Briarcliff Avenue, the entire block, every building, including yours." Marcus's phone hand dropped to his side. He stared at the closed restaurant, the yellow notice, the cluster of employees he couldn't look at, and felt something he hadn't felt since he was a child, watching his father's face when a deal went wrong. Fear. There is more, the lawyer continued. The investigator pulled a police report from last week, a witness statement filed by someone named Danielle Torres, the barista at the coffee shop on the corner. She describes an assault by you on an elderly man in front of your restaurant. The victim's name in the report is Arthur Devereaux. The world stopped. The old man, the corduroy jacket, the rusted Camry, the groceries on the pavement. The man Marcus had grabbed by the collar, shoved against a car, and told to disappear. The man who owned everything he could see. Marcus sat down on the curb outside his closed restaurant and put his head in his hands. At that exact moment, a rusted 1998 Toyota Camry turned onto Briarcliff Avenue. It parked, crookedly, as always, in the same spot where Marcus had thrown an old man's groceries 10 days ago. Arthur Devereaux got out, cane in one hand. No grocery bag this time. Just himself, his ripped corduroy jacket, and the quiet authority of a man who'd been alive long enough to know that power was only useful when you spent it on the right things. He walked up the sidewalk, slowly, his cane tapping the pavement in a rhythm that Marcus heard the way a condemned man hears a clock. Marcus stood up. His face was gray. His hands hung at his sides. He looked like a building with the foundation pulled out. "Mr. Hale," Arthur said. Marcus's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "You," he managed. "You're Devereaux." "I am." "You did this. All of it. The inspection, the lawsuits, the consequences," Arthur finished. "Yes, those are mine." Marcus's jaw worked. "Because of a parking space? Because I told you to move your car?" Arthur was quiet for a moment. He looked down the block, at the coffee shop where Danny was watching through the window, at the bookstore with its lights on again, at the flower shop where the owner was arranging a display on the sidewalk. "You threw my groceries on the ground," Arthur said. "And that made me angry. I'll admit that. You ripped my wife's jacket, and I won't pretend that didn't matter to me more than it should have." He turned back to Marcus. "But this isn't about me. I came back to this block because I own it, and I wanted to see what kind of man was leasing my buildings. What I found was a pattern. A man who beats people who can't fight back. A man who gropes women who work for him. A man who destroys small businesses because they can't afford to resist. A man who files false liens and bribes inspectors and treats every human being he encounters as either an obstacle or a tool." Arthur's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You didn't just assault me, Mr. Hale. You've been assaulting this entire block. These people. Their businesses. Their livelihoods. You've been treating them the way you treated me, as things to be shoved aside when they're inconvenient." Marcus's face twisted. "You don't know what I built. You don't know what it takes to—" "I built more than you'll ever touch," Arthur said, and for the first time, his voice carried an edge. "I built it from nothing. I built it honestly, and I gave it up to hold my wife's hand while she died. So don't talk to me about what it takes, son. You don't have the vocabulary." Marcus went silent. His eyes were wet, not from remorse, from the particular anguish of a man who just realized that the ground he'd been standing on had never been his. "What do you want?" Marcus whispered. "Money? The restaurant?"
I'll sign it over. All of it. I don't want your restaurant, Arthur said. It's already closed. And based on what the structural engineers found, it should have been closed months ago. You put 20 families at risk with those basement modifications. 20 apartments full of people sleeping above support columns you removed to build yourself a private lounge. Marcus flinched. Here's what's going to happen, Arthur continued. You're going to settle every lawsuit.
All 7, generously. You're going to vacate the premises within 30 days. The lease is being terminated for cause. You're going to remove your name from every property on this block that you have any interest in. And you're going to leave Briarcliff Avenue permanently. And if I don't? Then the criminal complaint I've been holding back gets filed. Assault. The building code violations get referred for criminal prosecution. The health inspector you bribed gets investigated, which means you get investigated. The structural modifications get referred to the district attorney for reckless endangerment. And the 7 women who are suing you go to the press. Because believe me, Mr. Hale, this story is exactly the kind that journalists love. Rich man destroys everything he touches. Film at 11. Marcus stared at him. The Porsche was parked 10 feet away, gleaming in the afternoon sun. It looked absurd now. A shiny toy next to the reality of a life built on hurting people. You planned all of this, Marcus said. From the beginning. From the moment you threw my groceries, Arthur confirmed. I've had 50 years of practice solving problems. You were a moderately complex one. This will ruin me. You ruined yourself. I'm just making sure the world knows it. Arthur turned and walked back toward the Camry. His cane tapped the sidewalk. His pace was slow, unhurried. The walk of a man who had all the time in the world because the only person who'd ever made him rush was buried on a hillside she'd loved. He stopped, turned back. One more thing, Mr. Hale. Marcus looked up. Hollow. The parking space. It was public. There was never a reserved sign. Arthur's mouth twitched, the smallest suggestion of a smile. But I parked crooked. I'll give you that. He got in the Camry and drove away. Danny watched from the coffee shop window. She didn't know the old man's name. She didn't understand the full scope of what had just happened. But she saw Marcus Hale sitting on the curb outside his closed restaurant with his head in his hands. And she saw the rusted Toyota Camry disappearing down the block. And she felt something shift in her chest. Hope. Small, tentative, bruised, but real. Marcus Hale settled all 7 lawsuits. Total cost, north of $2 million. Every NDA lifted. Every woman free to speak publicly. Claudia Reyes used her settlement to go back to school. Jessica Thornton opened a catering business and hired 3 of the other women. Marcus vacated Ember within 21 days. The building was structurally remediated over 4 months, funded by the Devereaux Trust. The apartments above were certified safe. The tenants never knew how close they'd come to disaster. Marcus's real estate ventures collapsed. The false liens were reversed. Former associates started talking once his protection was gone. He left the city. No perp walk, no cameras. He just stopped showing up. He became what he'd tried to make Arthur. Invisible. Danny's coffee shop stayed open. The bookstore came back. The flower shop stayed. A bakery opened where Ember used to be. A family operation making bread that made the whole street smell like home every morning at 5 a.m. Arthur came by on Saturdays. He'd park the Camry, still crooked, buy coffee from Danny, browse the bookstore, pick up flowers for Margaret's grave. He never told anyone who he was. One Saturday, Danny stopped him. "I know who you are," she said. I looked up the county records. Whitfield Holdings, Devereaux Trust. You're the old man he pushed down. Arthur sipped his coffee. I'm an old man who parks badly. Beyond that, I'm just a customer. You saved this block. Danny, all I did was enforce a lease and hire some lawyers. You were the one who helped me off the ground, when 15 other people watched and did nothing. That matters more than anything I did with a phone call. But keep making good coffee. Keep this shop open. Keep being the kind of person who helps someone when they're on the ground. That's worth more than everything I own. He walked out. The Camry pulled away, indistinguishable from 100 other old cars driven by 100 other old men the world had decided were invisible. And on a hillside, across town, Arthur set fresh flowers, white roses, Margaret's favorite, beside her headstone, and sat on the bench. I wore your jacket today, he said. The corduroy one. It's got a rip in the shoulder. Some young man grabbed it. He paused, as if listening. I fixed it, Maggie. The block, the people, everything. Except the rip. I'm keeping that. Reminds me that even old men should pay attention to where they park. He sat there until the sun went down. Then he drove home in the Camry she'd picked out, parked it in the garage she'd organized, and walked into the house they'd shared for 40 years. Quiet, modest, full of everything that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, enough.